coming on the air with an American who is finally coming home with the Kremlin, releasing former Marine Trevor Reed after more than 2 years behind bars. But what about the other Americans still stuck in Russia? Tonight, my conversation with the brother of Paul Whelan, who's still locked up there. Plus, as the White House gets ready to ask for new help for Ukraine, the EU is accusing Vladimir Putin of gas blackmail after he cuts off deliveries to Poland and Bulgaria. We're going to talk about how the U.S. is stepping in to help. And lawyers for George Floyd and Amir Locke are praising a new report that finds a decade-long pattern of racist and misogynistic practices by Minneapolis PD. So how's it going to get fixed? We'll take a look. Plus, our sources take us inside the drama in today's House Republican meeting, with Kevin McCarthy apparently getting a standing ovation. Why those leaked tapes where he criticized former President Trump and members of his own party may not be as damaging to his political ambitions as some folks think. And we're keeping up with the Kardashians, with more of a Judge Judy vibe, you could say. Why the family's latest made-for-TV reality moment is playing out in the courtroom. We'll have that later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we're coming on the air with what is just objectively good news. A significant personal and political win for the U.S., for President Biden, and for Trevor Reed, who is finally heading home after nearly 2 years imprisoned in Russia. And you can see this moment here. This is video from Russian state TV. It's said to show the moment that Reed, a former Marine, was getting brought to a plane for today's prisoner swap. I have to tell you that NBC News can't independently verify when, where, and under what conditions it was shot, but there you have it again from Russian state TV. Reed has long denied the allegation he was locked up for, that he assaulted a Russian officer in 2019. And his family says his health had been getting worse. Sources tell NBC that that was part of the reason for the urgency to get him home. The Reed family, they're planning to talk for the first time on camera later on tonight. We're going to bring that to you live when it happens right here on NBC News Now. And keep in mind, this prisoner swap that freed Reed is the highest profile one in the Biden administration so far. And this very thing, a swap, was top of mind when I talked with Trevor's parents a couple weeks ago, right after they met face-to-face with President Biden.
We discussed our son. We told him about how he is as a person. We told about his resolve as a Marine and how he's acted as a prisoner of war, is what my son considers himself. And I think he was impressed by that. And then we told him how we feel about prisoner swaps, because if nothing else works, we've always been told everything's on the table.
And clearly that is what ultimately worked. So Reed is home. But what's next? Or should we say, who is next? President Biden today is pledging that we won't stop until Paul Whelan and others join Trevor in the loving arms of family and friends, adding it required difficult decisions he doesn't take lightly. He referenced Paul Whelan. Whelan's also being held in Russia. You've also got, of course, Brittany Griner, the WNBA star who's been detained there since February. And now Griner's agent, in a new op-ed, is writing her community's doing its best to have confidence in the White House's commitment to doing everything they can to get Griner home. With all of that as the backdrop, let me bring in our White House reporter, Mike Memoli. So, Mike, tell us more about how this swap went down, months in the making, per White House officials, and who they swapped for.
Yeah, Hallie. Well, first of all, I think it goes without saying that this, considering the state of the relationship between the United States and Russia at this moment, is a remarkable breakthrough. To have this kind of diplomatic exchange happen in the middle of a active conflict, not necessarily directly between these two countries, but certainly, as Russia is saying, with in some ways a proxy battle between the two, is significant. The White House has been reluctant to get too much into the details of how this went down, besides saying that this is obviously something that has been a top priority for the administration. There have been discussions about this for months. We know, in addition to high-level State Department officials, including the U.S. ambassador to Russia, dealing with their Russian counterparts, we also saw Bill Richardson, the former New Mexico governor, a former UN ambassador, went to Moscow just before the invasion of Ukraine to also make the case. Now, Hallie, I also heard President Biden say in a very different context today, but that all politics is personal. And I think it's also significant the role that Reed's parents have had in getting us to this point. I was traveling with the president to Texas about a month ago. They had hoped to meet him there in person. They spoke by phone. You spoke to the family, of course, when they were able to meet with the president. The White House is not saying that that was sort of a sort of breaking moment in terms of getting this done, but I think it certainly had an impact on the president and got us to this point, in addition to, of course, the concerns about Reed's health.
really concerned, Mike, as you know, about the status of how Trevor Reed was doing in Russia, his health, the conditions he was being held under. And you make the point that there was a different diplomatic channel, right? Even while these tensions with Russia had boiled over with this war in Ukraine, these discussions to get Reed released were ongoing. But here's the question, Mike. It's not just Trevor Reed. It's Paul Whelan, right? It's to a degree, it's Brittany Griner, of course. I spoke with Paul Whelan's brother, David, who is also looking for answers. His family has not had the opportunity to meet face-to-face with President Biden yet. I want to play for you a little bit of what he told me. Do you believe this administration will do everything they can to bring your brother home?
I do. Yes, I think certainly since President Biden's administration started last January, well, a year ago, January now, they have been very communicative. They've been very supportive. They've been a lot more transparent about the issues facing hostages, about how they can go about releasing hostages. And it's a difficult business. And I think that the disappointment we feel today has more to do with the fact that Paul is in Russia and Trevor was in Russia. And we thought, well, maybe all of the people in Russia would come home together. And clearly that's not the case.
How is Paul doing? Do you have any idea, sort of, what is the latest update you've gotten?
Well, I think physically he's doing as well as you can in a labor camp. I think mentally he's shattered. He had a call with my parents today where he learned about Trevor's release, and he said, why am I being left behind? And it's a good question. And I don't think that there's a good answer for that. But he is doing the best he can.
So, ma'am, we know the message from the White House to the Reeds. What is their message to the Whelan and to the Griner families?
Well, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked this question directly today. She said that the White House continues to speak with not just the Whelans, but other families who are facing similar dilemmas. But here is, I think, why it's of such concern to the Whelans. You had asked earlier about the other side of this exchange. It was a Russian pilot by the name of Konstantin Yaroshenko. He has really been such a top priority for the Russians in a similar way that we have the priority of the Reeds here, that there is concern not just from the Whelans but from others that the U.S. really has played its biggest chip here and that there won't be any similar comparable chip that might result in a similar exchange down the road. The White House, though, says these kinds of discussions are still ongoing and they hope to be able to bring all of these individuals home.
Mike Memoli outside the White House for us tonight. Mem, thank you. I should mention, too, we are going to hear from the Reeds live coming up later on. We're going to bring that to you when it happens. You've also got the White House getting ready as we talk about the broader dynamics with Russia and the war in Ukraine. They're getting ready to ask Congress for what administration officials say is a massive amount of money for Ukraine, a big chunk of change intended to help that country for the next 5 months. And there's still some potential progress on the diplomacy front with staffers at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine on their way back to the office. You see a few of them there in Lviv. They're meeting up for the first time since they were evacuated a couple months ago. They're getting ready to head back to the embassy in Kyiv ASAP. But it's all happening as Vladimir Putin ratchets up the economic pressure. Because Russia, you know what they're doing now? They're cutting off natural gas deliveries to Poland and Bulgaria, both of whom, we'll remind you, are NATO countries. The state-owned company Gazprom says the two are not complying with the Kremlin's rule to pay in rubles, but EU leaders call this whole thing gas blackmail. Cal Perry is in Kyiv for us tonight. Gas blackmail, Cal, right? The EU is not mincing words on this. What is the concern that allies might back down in the fight against Russia? Because they are getting, major energy issues out of this, big energy implications given this gas cutoff.
Yeah, and look, we know this well from our own country having to deal with energy prices. It is a pressure point that Russia knows that it can apply to these countries, and it's clearly in response to the increase of weapons and the kind of weapons that are flowing into this country, the fact that these weapons are more and more lethal. Now, look, we've had two different kind of reactions. Poland, for their part, saying it's not really going to affect them, that they have so much gas in storage that they think they can get by for the next couple of years. Bulgaria seems to be in a different position. They seem to be far more sort of hurt by this. The U.S. saying maybe they'll try to get some natural gas into the Netherlands in the future, bring that sort of to the south. But the reality is this could really hurt the European economy. And again, it's one card that Russia knew that it could play. It's choosing now to play it. We'll see if it stops the weapons that are coming in. If you listen to the Pentagon, you listen to the State Department, they say it won't have an effect, that they were prepared for it. But clearly this is an economic retaliation, Hallie.
But talk to me about what it's like on the ground right now where you are in Ukraine, especially when we look at Mariupol, which is that port city in the south that's been sieged for weeks, basically. You have UK officials now saying they're worried about what looks like free-falling bombs, unguided bombs hitting that could kill even more innocent people seemingly at random.
Right. And look, 63 days now of this city being under constant bombardment. You're seeing the aftermath of what remains in this city, a city that's basically been wiped off the map. And now you have, as you're laying out, unguided munitions. That is just what they call dumb bombs being lobbed into the city, indiscriminately killing whoever remains there. And look, we know that the military forces are in and around this steel plant. That's being bombarded as well. So the rest of the city, we suspect, is mostly civilians who have been lucky enough or strong enough or whatever you want to say to survive this bombardment. Add to that, Hallie, yesterday we had the news of basically a third mass grave found, at least a third slit trench mass grave. It's just one more indication of how brutal the war has been in this city.
Cal Perry live for us in Kyiv. We're glad to have you there, Cal. Thank you for being with us. Back here to news out of Washington and some hot drama going down behind closed doors. Our sources telling us all about it, with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy talking about the elephant in the room at the House Republican huddle this morning, those leaked tapes from the New York Times, and saying the GOP needs to move forward. Sources say McCarthy got a standing O. But things got a little heated toward the end of the meeting when Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz confronted somebody else in Republican leadership, Steve Scalise, about some of these comments made in the days after January 6th.
Yeah, I mean, it's potentially illegal what he's doing. Well, he's putting people in jeopardy, and he doesn't need to be doing this.
A source in the room said Gaetz asked Scalise to say which of his comments were illegal after January 6th. Scalise saying there was a lot of information flying around at the time. All of this, of course, speaks to the divide in the House Republican Party in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, the divide that has all but disappeared now. It comes as Select Committee Chairman Benny Thompson. Remember, he leads the committee looking into what happened before and after the insurrection. He told reporters today, hey, they'd love to have McCarthy come and talk to them, after this new audio was released from a call McCarthy had with Republican leadership just days after the insurrection, worried about how comments from members of his own party could actually incite more violence.
Tension is too high. The country is too crazy. I do not want to look back and think we caused something or we missed something and someone got hurt. I don't want to play politics with any of that.
Garrett Haake, our senior congressional correspondent, is joining us now. So, Garrett, that was Kevin McCarthy then. He has struck a very different tone now, and yet, behind closed doors, is getting, apparently, according to your reporting and our team on the Hill, a standing ovation from his fellow Republicans. Can you explain to us what the dynamics are at play here and why it matters big picture?
Well, I think the two key dynamics here to keep in mind are that Donald Trump still supports McCarthy, made that clear in a Wall Street Journal interview late last week. The rest of the House Republican Conference is going to take some of their cues from him. And the rest of it is these House Republicans don't want to talk about January 6th anymore. They want to move on. They think the issue and the way that it's discussed to this day is a distraction. It's meant to divide Republicans and make them look bad. We saw that in effect today with the rank and file of Republican House members rallying around the man who would be their speaker, or at least their most likely speaker, if they win the majority next year. But they're not every Republican is in Kevin McCarthy's corner. I talked to Adam Kinzinger, who's probably his most prominent critic, arguably, I guess you would say, from the left in the Republican conference about all of this today. And here's what he told me.
Even if he wins that race, I don't envy him because he's going to have to, again, try to assuage those that don't believe in truth. And at some point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I've been given a huge opportunity. What have I done with it?
And that is the challenge, Hallie, especially as it goes to someone like Matt Gaetz. Gaetz is no fan of McCarthy, but he is a very prominent member now of this Republican conference, and someone who McCarthy or whomever the Republican speaker would be is going to have to deal with.
Then explain how this plays into the January 6th Select Committee investigation and why these new recordings that have been leaked by the New York Times are adding fuel to the fiery desire of the committee members to want to speak to Kevin McCarthy. Bottom line, is it going to turn into a subpoena? Because they can ask him and he can say no. The question is, are they going to put some muscle behind it?
Yeah, I don't know if there's enough here that might push them over the line into subpoenaing McCarthy. Remember, they've not filed a subpoena for any sitting lawmaker. This has been a battle reticent to engage in. And what we've heard from McCarthy in these recordings have all been conversations that he had after January 6th. So while they might be politically embarrassing, they might be politically damaging to him down the line, they don't necessarily shed any new light on what he might have known beforehand. Should there be recordings that do so, that might change the calculus. But the committee members know McCarthy was involved in conversations both with the members who were close to Donald Trump's inner circle and with Trump's inner circle himself. And so he does does have valuable information, but whether having a battle with him over a subpoena in the limited time remaining in this Congress is worth it, that's a decision they haven't made yet.
Garrett Haake, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Today, lawyers for George Floyd and Amir Locke are calling a new report from Minnesota's Human Rights Office monumental. Why? Because this report said the Minneapolis Police Department has been engaged in a practice of racial discrimination for years. The lawyers say they've been arguing since the killing of George Floyd that this pattern and this practice exists. They feel somewhat validated by this report, which looked at the police department over the last decade and found it violated the state's civil rights law with a culture where racist and misogynistic language is tolerated, where police are almost 2 times more likely to use neck restraints on black people, more likely to use force on people of color. They even found officers used some social media to target black leaders and organizations unrelated to any criminal activity. They cite this time when an officer pretended to be a black community member to message the local NAACP branch to criticize the group. No comment yet on all of this from the Minneapolis Police Department, but I want to bring in Shaquille Brewster, who's been covering this and joins us now. 2 years in the making, Shaq, this report was, right? Who are they holding responsible? And what practically in a concrete way changes because of this report? Not theoretically, right? Not in the let's think about it and talk about it. Like in layman's terms, what difference will it make?
I'll take that last question first, because this will lead to a court-approved agreement between the city and between the state on what changes they want to take place and how quickly those changes will be put into place. When you look at the report, it's 72 pages. It involved reviewing 700 hours of body camera video, thousands of interviews with people. When you look at the report, they blame 3 key things. One, lack of training. They say that folks weren't trained in how to implement new policies. They blame what they call insufficient and ineffective accountability systems, and they also blame the lack of collection action by leaders. One example of that was after George Floyd's murder, you had leaders come out and saying we're announcing a new use of force policy, but officers weren't meaningfully trained on what that really meant. So you had different actions taking place, and the actions not complying with the announcements.
The context and the backdrop is important here because this is a police department that's had a fairly long history of accusations of abuse. And we've seen, I think people remember this, the protests that we've seen in Minneapolis for George Floyd, Dante Wright, Amir Locke, others, et cetera. Can you give us a sense of the community reaction here? Because it's also interesting, you know, listen, presumably the Minneapolis PD will come out with some kind of a response at some point. That hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah. Well, we actually did. Just in the past couple of minutes, we heard from the police chief. We heard from the mayor. The mayor saying that the actions in this report were repugnant. And the police chief, just in the past couple of minutes, Hallie, the police chief saying that racial discrimination has no role in the Minneapolis Police Department and says that she believes her officers are willing and ready to lead that change that is so required. They're essentially embracing this report. It's important to note that the police chief was not the police chief when George Floyd was murdered or in the past 10 years as part of this investigation. But you have both leaders saying that they are ready, willing, and able, they say, to meet these requirements. Again, these will be court-ordered requirements that will be agreed to by both the city and the state of Minnesota. The term that you'll probably hear in the next couple of weeks or months is the consent decree. That's the formal agreement that will be court-ordered between the two parties.
Shaq Brewster, live for us there on that. Shaq, thank you very much. Appreciate it. In its final argument of the term today, the Supreme Court heard a case on whether Oklahoma had the jurisdiction to prosecute a man who was convicted of child neglect because of where it happened and who was involved. Manuel Castro Huerta was sentenced to 35 years in prison for child neglect. But his lawyers argue that because his child is a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokees and the neglect took place on tribal land, the state of Oklahoma just didn't have the jurisdiction, basically, to prosecute him. But Oklahoma says because Castro Huerta is not Native American, the state does have jurisdiction. As the law stands now, only the federal government and the tribes can prosecute Native Americans accused of crimes on tribal lands. But the state says since tribal lands include most of Tulsa, the state's second biggest city, a lot of violent criminals could end up walking free. By the way, today's oral arguments, also the last of Justice Stephen Breyer's tenure on the court, with the Chief Justice giving a rather emotional send-off. Watch.
The oral argument we have just concluded is the last the court will hear with Justice Breyer on the bench. For 28 years, this has been his arena for remarks profound and moving, questions challenging and insightful, and hypotheticals downright silly. For now, we leave the courtroom with deep appreciation for the privilege of sharing this bench with him.
Our justice correspondent Pete Williams is with us. I want to get to what we just heard from the Chief Justice in a second. Was he getting choked up?
Oh, without
Sounded
question.
like it. But let me go to this issue of Castro Huerta, right? And this jurisdiction over tribal lands or not. Explain the significance of this and the broader impact and why this matters.
So first of all, he will be prosecuted. He's already pleaded guilty in federal court. It's a lesser sentence than what he would have gotten in state court, very likely. So it's not that he'll walk free. So 2 years ago, the Supreme Court said that on tribal lands, which is about 40% of Oklahoma, the state cannot prosecute cases that are in which Native Americans are the defendants. So this case is answering a question left unanswered by that decision. Well, what about crimes committed on tribal lands by non-Native Americans? That's what this case was. And what the state says is we need to be able to prosecute these cases because the federal government just doesn't have the resources. There are hundreds and hundreds of cases that they're not going after. They don't have the money to investigate them. They don't have the money to prosecute them. We can do that. The tribes are not doing it. We have to pick up the slack. What the tribes say is, the state has a history here of discriminating against Indians. The tribes can handle it themselves or the federal government. They don't need the state to come in here. Neil Gorsuch, who wrote the opinion 2 years ago, noted this history and said that why should things be any different? The lawyer, Brett Kavanaugh, said, this is by not allowing the state to come in, you're not doing any favor to Native Americans. They're not being protected by prosecutors the way they should be. Another thing that's changed since 2 years ago is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg joined the majority when it ruled this way 2 years ago. She's been replaced by Amy Coney Barrett, who may now be the controlling vote in this case. Right. And she didn't show her cards really one way or the other. So I'm not sure how this is going to come out. The
other piece of news out of today, of course, was it's the last one. It was the last set of oral arguments that Justice Breyer heard.
For this term, that's right.
Right. But for Justice Breyer, who's leaving court now.
Now, in a normal term, before the pandemic, this would not be his last day on the bench. The justices will hand down decisions in May and June. Right. And normally speaking, the justices would take to the bench on decision days. The justice who wrote the opinion would announce the opinion. Sometimes there'd be spirited dissents. But they're not doing that now because of the pandemic. This is the last time the court will take the bench during this term. So you can understand why the chief was a little emotional today. It's 28 years that Stephen Breyer's been on the court.
Are they friends?
Oh, yes. And, when Sandra Day O'Connor was on the court, she was sort of the social director. She was the one who organized the lunches.
Cocktails.
Right. I don't know about cocktails, but certainly lunches in the court. And I don't know that there's anybody that does that now, but if there is a person who sort of gets along with all the justices, jokes with Clarence Thomas, always has some sort of a corny joke to tell when they get together for their conferences, it's Steve Breyer. So I think that they will all miss him for that reason.
Pete Williams, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Southern California is being forced today to declare a water shortage emergency for the first time ever. This is a big deal because you've got 6 million people in parts of L.A., Ventura, and San Bernardino counties who could only do some outdoor watering once every week starting June 1st. Now, the water company says it only has half the water it needs to get through the summer. You may be thinking, fine, you can't water your lawns. This has way bigger implications, right? One of California's biggest water companies, the Metropolitan Water District, it supplies water to 40% of the state's population. Just a couple of hours ago, officials there basically waved the white flag. They're saying something's got to change. What's behind this? A really long dry spell that has strained the system and lowered reservoir levels. You've got hotter temperatures blamed on climate change. That makes things worse. The governor of the state, Gavin Newsom, has already asked people to voluntarily cut back on how much water they use by 15%. That goal hasn't been met. Steve Patterson is covering this story tonight. Steve, since the days when I used to live in California and cover this, droughts were an issue. Water consumption was an issue. This is a decades-long problem for the state. What's the fix, considering how bad it's getting, with many experts blaming climate change in part?
Yeah, and I've been on to talk with you about this before. 95% of the entirety of California is under severe drought. If you want to go even farther, 40% is under extreme drought. So that should feel as alarming as it sounds. This state needs to be alarmist here. This is an emergency. To answer your question, there's no quick fix in the short term, aside from the simplest thing that you can think of. We have to stop using so much water. In the short term, if you're not one of these communities under that department. That means state and local communities. They have to work at making people realize this is a crisis and hard message, if not even mandate even further, that people need to fix their behavior at the ground level. Last month, the governor allocated an additional $22 million for immediate drought response. $8 million of that was just for messaging. And if things are as bad as they are, a lot of people are arguing that's not enough. It should look like neighborhoods that shouldn't be filling up pools, washing down streets, running water fountains. Which mean that bans that are just under consideration right now, like watering decorative grass around businesses and institutions, should be more considered. You know, when you take it to home, it should mean for all of us, you might want to think about upgrading your appliances, replacing grass lawns for climate efficient plants, fixing leaks, recycling indoor water for outdoor water, you know, taking a 5-minute shower instead of a 20-minute shower. Really common stuff that I'm sure you heard when you were here. If you want to get a little broader, though, it's about lawmaking that protects the groundwater, which in this situation, in a drought, is so critical. And then making infrastructure as efficient as possible, fixing cracks, making sure everything is running smooth, the aquifers are running smoothly. All of that, though, obviously, so much more easier said than done.
Totally. I mean, you look at one of the bills that's going through, I think, the state Senate right now, right, which would limit the number of gallons people can use in a specific house, you know, down like 8 or 9 gallons. That would be months away. Then there's questions of enforcement, right? How do you actually force people to do that if you make it a law?
Right. Right. I mean, and those are the big questions, right? I mean, you have to first put the messaging out there. As you mentioned, you know, Governor Newsom issued that 15% statement. Governor Brown was at 25%, and there was a little bit of a turn when he issued that. So maybe it's just putting the word out there, mandating that it should happen, arguing with people that this is critical, this is a crisis, the state is not recovering at the current rate that it's going. People first need to know that. Part of that $8 million was a new messaging campaign to try to get into more people's homes about this, to try to just trigger this and message this to people. I think more of that work needs to be done first before we start implementing and thinking about enforcement, because people aren't even trying in the first place, Hallie.
Steve Patterson, live for us in a dry-looking L.A. as well for us. Steve Patterson, thank you so much. Good to see you. Coming up, remembering Madeleine Albright, what President Biden had to say about the former Secretary of State, a trailblazer, at her funeral service today. That's in the 5 things. Plus, Dr. Fauci dropping out of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, even as he said COVID in the U.S. is out of the pandemic phase. We're going to talk about what this all means coming up. Some interesting news on the COVID front, right? Because you have Dr. Anthony Fauci now saying that the pandemic phase is over for this country. He says new infections, hospitalizations, and death are moving toward endemic phase here. But of course, COVID cases are still on the rise. That's why I've got some concerns now about that big White House Correspondents' Dinner here in Washington on Saturday, with some people, for new reasons now, questioning whether it should even be held at all. You know who's not going to be there? Dr. Fauci. He's bowing out. He's basically saying it's not worth the risk to him. And now there are some people wondering if it's safe for President Biden to go. Not too long ago, actually right before we came up on the air, the White House confirmed he'll still go to speak, but he's not going to be there for the dinner part, and that he may wear a mask when he's not giving remarks. We've got Dr. Natalie Azar here to discuss all of this. So I think what's interesting, Natalie, beyond the do people care about the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington? This is a symbolic moment, right? It's the president, 2,600 people expected to be there, or at least invited. Precautions in place. They're asking people to test. You have to be vaccinated. And it seems like a real optical thing of the White House on full display, wanting to show that President Biden is getting out there, getting back to a life lived as normal in this pandemic, but also being cognizant the risks are still real. They still exist. And Dr. Fauci's non-attendance is an example of that.
Yep, and you laid it out perfectly, Hallie. I mean, I think that you could probably put a room of epidemiologists together, and there would be one argument and counter-argument after the other about whether or not this thing should go on. Yes, I do like the idea that, you know, Biden is going to sort of be the face of this is our new normal, and we have these precautions in place, as you mentioned. You have to be vaccinated. You have to have proof of a negative rapid, which as we've been talking about, it's not 100%, but it's pretty darn close to saying that you are not contagious and saying, look, this is how we're going to conduct our lives. But do we really think, what is it, 2,600 or 2,900 people, something like that? Do we really think no one's going to come out of that Correspondents' dinner without testing positive? They probably will. And that's where I kind of have a little bit of an issue with it, because if we are trying to do everything to protect Americans, Biden's goal is to protect Americans, participating in an event which in all likelihood will probably result in somebody's got to be infected, right? Because they might just be harboring the virus and they just don't have enough yet, and they're going to get, they're going to test positive a couple days later. I don't know, Hallie, right? I mean, we'll see what happens. I feel like there's going to be kind of like pushback or fallout no matter what he does.
So, but what should the takeaway be for people who don't, don't care about the dinner, don't live in Washington, aren't going to go, but who are thinking, well, how do I navigate events like maybe a concert or something like that, where there's a lot of people in an indoor space, festivals, if you will. Now that Dr. Fauci is sort of signaling we're moving to an endemic phase and not a pandemic phase, how should we be thinking about this in our own lives?
So I think I like, in a sense, what Dr. Fauci said. And he says, going there, I am risking getting infected. He's obviously boosted twice. He's very well protected against severe disease. But for him, even that idea that he could get infected and maybe slip through the cracks and get sick enough to be hospitalized is not a risk that he's willing to take. Maybe his wife has underlying medical conditions. We don't know. He doesn't need to divulge that to us. But this is what he's doing, is exercising his right to, do a calculus of his own risks. He is an older person, as is President Biden. And for all of us navigating our daily lives, what risk are we willing to take on for ourselves? And then, of course, indirectly, whatever potential risk that poses to the loved ones in our lives. And I think we're probably going to be making those, yin-yang arguments with our arguments, sort of conflicts with ourselves, until it's truly become so endemic that we feel, the annual numbers of deaths approximate flu, et cetera, et cetera. We're not, that's sort of a different conversation.
So then what is the pragmatic significance on a practical level of calling it an endemic or it turning into an endemic versus a pandemic?
By definition, the pandemic means that it's still incredibly disruptive to our lives, that, businesses are closed, schools are closed, hospitals are, healthcare resources are being stressed. That's when it really becomes, or is, in a pandemic phase. In the endemic phase, it means it's a virus that is circulating all the time, and has little, blips where it becomes more of an epidemic, where you see a rise in cases, but a rise in cases that is expected and anticipated, and again, doesn't cause the kind of disruption that it did when we had a pandemic, which at this point, I would argue that's probably true for us, at least in this country.
Dr. Azar, great to see you. Thank you for that clear breakdown. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things now our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright honored in Washington today as a who's who of VIPs. Look at that. Multiple former presidents, the current president, showed up for her funeral service, including President Biden, delivering a tribute. Listen.
With her goodness and grace, her humanity, and her intellect, she turned the tide of history.
Albright was the first female Secretary of State. She died of cancer last month at the age of 84. Number 2, a Myanmar court sentenced Aung San Suu Kyi to 5 years in prison for corruption. She was found guilty in 11 cases against her. She led Myanmar for 5 years before being forced out of power in a military coup. Number 3, former President Trump, he is now appealing a judge's order that forces him to pay $10,000 a day because he didn't comply with a subpoena from the New York's Attorney General. It's tied to an investigation into his organization's finances. The AG's office is calling the appeal a page out of Mr. Trump's playbook. Number 4, more than 120,000 pounds of ground beef have been recalled because of concerns over E. coli. So if you have it in your fridge or your freezer, head to our website, right? Because the Food Safety and Inspection Service says it's for Lakeside Refrigerated Services. It's a company based in Jersey. If you have beef from that place or one of its brands, toss it out. Number 5, SpaceX launching a group of astronauts for NASA earlier this morning. The capsule is on its way to the International Space Station. It will spend about 6 months there. Elon Musk's company has now sent 26 people into orbit in less than 2 years. Still to come, there's been a lot of talk about a Trump-era border policy and a lot of confusion, too. We're going to tell you exactly what Title 42 is and what the White House is planning to do about it with new questions today for the DHS secretary. That's next. Members of the LGBTQ+ community furious over what's going down in Oklahoma and Tennessee today. We're going to explain in just a minute. But first, let's talk about immigration with Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas telling lawmakers today he's making sure to have a plan in place for May 23rd, when President Biden intends to lift Title 42. Okay, you're looking at this, you're going, Hallie, you keep talking about Title 42. I don't get it. What is it? Why does it matter? We've heard a lot about it this week. It lets the U.S. kick out migrants seeking asylum because of the pandemic. This whole thing's expected to get legal challenges. Just this week, a federal judge says he's going to issue a temporary restraining order to stop the president from winding this rule down before the middle of May. He could even try to pause that plan entirely. So why does Title 42, this obscure World War II era rule, play such a big part in today's immigration policy? Here's the context check. Title 42, it's been on the books since this guy was president, FDR. It was part of the 1944 Public Health Service Act, a law designed to stop the spread of tuberculosis by giving resources to prevent and treat the disease. Flash forward to 2020, when former President Trump, at the start of the pandemic, used Title 42 to close borders while the world still wasn't sure why or how the coronavirus spread.
Left unchecked, this would cripple our immigration system, overwhelm our healthcare system, and severely damage our national security. We're not going to let that happen.
That was reportedly against the recommendations of top CDC officials who said they were overruled by then Vice President Mike Pence, according to the Associated Press. Still, since then, the U.S. has been allowed to kick out migrants at the border who are seeking asylum, more than 1.7 million in all in the last 2 years. But as of April 1st, the CDC says Title 42 isn't needed now. The Biden administration agrees, saying public health policy shouldn't determine immigration policy anymore.
Our view and the president's view is that we have a broken immigration system that's been long overdue to be fixed.
The White House already ended the policy for unaccompanied migrant children back in March. But the Department of Homeland Security warns there could be as many as 18,000 border apprehensions a day if it's lifted. And with the Border Patrol saying encounters are already on the rise, even some Democrats in the president's own party now want Title 42 to stick around while a longer-term solution gets worked out.
My hope is that that will be reconsidered appropriately.
And now Ken Delanian, who can break down more of this with us. So, Ken, that's kind of where we are, how we got here and where we are now. So then what are the next steps, right? Take us into the future here a little bit, because Secretary Mayorkas got a lot of heat from Republicans today when he was on the Hill about what is the plan? When is it going to be implemented?
Yes, and so he has unveiled a plan to get ready for this. And among the steps they are announcing are they're ready to hold as many as 18,000 migrants, up from capacity of 13,000 at the beginning of 2021. They're talking about trying to be more efficient at processing migrants, and they're talking about cracking down and deporting more people who are not eligible for asylum. But there are real questions about whether any of this is going to be enough to match what's expected to be a huge surge if this is lifted, Hallie.
Explain why there would be a surge.
Because there's a backlog, essentially. There are people waiting now in Mexico, and that's one of the problems with this. The reason advocates are saying it should be lifted is Human Rights First has chronicled attacks, rapes, squalid conditions that these migrants who are waiting to seek asylum are being subjected to in Mexico. But the question is, are they eligible for asylum, and what's going to happen if this flood of people comes to a system that's not ready for it?
And then there's all these legal challenges, right? And the anticipation of what might happen after May 23rd, once that rolls around, too.
That's right. So right now, this judge is only saying don't do anything now until May 23rd. He's saying he's going to forbid DHS from taking steps, which they were doing, to sort of have a soft launch, right? But he could actually block the thing from happening in the middle of May. And you know what? That could end up being a political salvation in some ways for the Biden administration, because the picture of, this surge of migrants going across the border in an election year is not great for President Biden, whose approval ratings on the issue of immigration are already very low.
Ken Delanian, thank you very much for being with us for that. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, Oklahoma's governor signing a ban on non-binary birth certificates, which some see as the latest attack on LGBTQ+ rights in this country. We'll get into it. Plus, if you have a run-in with the cops in one Virginia town, you can go ahead and rate your experience. We've got more details on that coming up in the local. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our West Coast Bureau, the University of California system says it's going to cover tuition for Native American students. Tuition and fees will be waived for some 600 students this fall. UC's president says the hope is to bridge enrollment gaps for that group. From our Washington Bureau, people in one Virginia town will now be able to rate their interactions with police officers. Cops in Warrenton are going to walk around with a business card that has a QR code so people can scan it with their phones. It then pops up a survey. You fill that out. The department's chief says the goal is to try to improve the relationship with members of the community. And from our Southeast Bureau, Fort Worth is now the first U.S. city to mine Bitcoin. The rigs have been donated by the Texas Blockchain Council, and they'll run out of City Hall 24/7. It's part of the city's pilot program to get into the crypto craze. But the mayor saying this could change the future of Fort Worth's economy. We'll see. Turning now to Oklahoma, which has now become the very first state to explicitly ban a non-binary gender marker on their state's birth certificates. The bill was signed by Republican Governor Kevin Stitt. And here's the deal. Okay, most states right now only give you the option to choose between male or female on your birth certificate. There are some places that are exploring adding a different mark, like instead of an M or an F, an X. Most states don't do that. And now there's Oklahoma that's the first state to actually write a law explicitly saying, no non-binary gender markers allowed. It comes as over in Tennessee, a bill that would let teachers misgender their transgender students is moving pretty quickly through that state's legislature. Under this law, public school staff could actually refuse to use a student's preferred pronoun. Why? The bill's authors say it's necessary to protect teachers and other school staff from what they're calling, quote, coerced speech. Matt Levites joins me now with this story. So, Matt, let me start with what's happening in Oklahoma, right? The Department of Health allowed a non-binary option last year. That made some Republicans mad. And it feels like that is the impetus for this ban that has now become law on anything like an X on a birth certificate instead of just an M or an F.
Right. So last year, as you just said, the Department of Health allowed a non-binary person who was born in the state to change their birth certificate records to reflect their non-binary identity. This angered a ton of Republicans, including the governor, who then signed an executive order effectively barring those changes in the future. And what we're seeing here this week is the governor signing this law that would effectively make that executive order permanent or not reversible with a stroke of a pen.
And then in Tennessee, you have this state that last year, there was no other state that had more anti-trans legislation than that state. This bill that lets public school teachers essentially overlook or ignore what a preferred pronoun is for a student in class.
Yeah, so activists are basically saying that imagine if you're a trans student and you need to ask a teacher a question. That could be about a lesson plan, or maybe you need feedback on an assignment. Maybe you just need to go to the bathroom. This bill would effectively empower teachers to belittle, demean, and dehumanize these students based off of characteristics that they cannot change, similar to their height or weight or race. That's effectively what this bill would do if it is signed into law.
Tell me more about what you're hearing from advocates, LGBTQ+ advocates, specifically about these two states, but also more broadly as we're seeing more and more laws, right? Record number of laws that limit rights for LGBTQ+ people.
Right. So really, this comes down to visibility. Over the last decade, we've seen LGBTQ people have a few major policy wins. We're seeing gay and trans characters regularly on TV and commercials, on billboards. And not everyone likes this. Some Americans are discomforted by these changes. So what you're seeing today is these politicians capitalizing off of that discomfort through fundraising and massive amounts of media attention by creating these laws.
Where's the fight headed next?
So most of the advocates that I've spoken with, unfortunately, tell me that the situation is going to get worse before it gets better. I've had one activist tell me that this is, a battle to the bottom of the barrel.
Matt Levides, thank you for staying on top of the story. Bring us updates when you have them. Appreciate it. Coming up after the break, some, I don't know, wild accusations? Is that a fair way to put it? I think so. Explosive coming out in court. And model Blac Chyna's lawsuit against the Kardashian family. There's been a lot of he said, she said here, so we're going to try and sort it all out next. Kim Kardashian and her mom, Kris Jenner, they are back in a California court today because along with sisters Kylie and Khloe, they're facing a $100 million lawsuit brought by Blac Chyna, a model and reality star who was once engaged to the Kardashians' brother, Rob. This sounds like a lot, right? Today, it's Jenner's boyfriend, Corey Gamble, on the stand. Gamble was immediately questioned about this one big fight that's the focal point of this suit. Let me explain this. It happened back in December of 2016. And according to Kylie Jenner's testimony in the case, her brother told her that Chyna held a gun to his head, tried to strangle him with a cell phone charger, and hit him with a 6-foot pole. She says her brother Rob also told her Blac Chyna was, quote, trying to kill me. It's all part of the civil trial where Chyna alleges the family defamed her, which led to her reality show with Rob getting canceled by E! After just one season. This is something that the family denies. Gotti Schwartz is joining us now. And Gotti, this has been, a dramatic trial so far. And Gamble today said he saw this fight himself with his own eyes.
That's right, Hallie. And so far, he might not be as famous as the Kardashian sisters, but Corey is playing a very pivotal role in all this because unlike the rest of the Kardashian family, he's saying he saw this fight at the center of all this firsthand. So just a quick recap. This whole thing really hinges on what you just described, whether Blac Chyna actually physically attacked Rob, hitting him with that pole, trying to strangle him with that phone cord, and then threatening him with a gun on the night that they were supposed to be celebrating the renewal of their show for season 2. Now, Chyna has said she never assaulted him, but Jenner's boyfriend, Corey Gamble, says he saw Blac Chyna beating Rob with his own eyes, had to step in to stop it. He says it started around 7 o'clock in the morning. Rob called his mom, Kris Jenner, and they could hear Chyna screaming in the background she was going to kill him. So Corey says he rushed over to the house, found Chyna armed with a pole, which she dropped. Then he says she started whipping him with a phone charger. He tried separating Chyna from Rob, but he says that she was punching him in the back of the head. She threw a chair at his car, then tried to throw a patio table at Rob, but Corey says he took that away. And then after all that, he says Chyna told him she wouldn't like Rob if he wasn't part of the Kardashian family. So a lot of fireworks that Chyna's legal team obviously disputes. Hallie?
We've also heard from Kim, from Khloe, from Kylie. They've all called Rob and Chyna's relationship toxic in this trial, right?
Yeah, and this defamation suit was brought by Chyna because she claims that Kim, Khloe, Kylie, Kris, they all went to E! And told them to pull the plug based on lies about her and Rob's relationship. But the Kardashian family is saying that first, this attack did happen. This was not a lie. Second, they didn't tell E! To pull the plug, but they did say that they would refuse to work with someone who was abusing their brother. So today on the stand, we saw Kim Kardashian explaining texts that she sent saying she didn't want Blac Chyna on Keeping Up with the Kardashians after the fight, and that was her prerogative because that's their show. But the Kardashians' legal team is insisting that the decision not to renew Rob and Chyna's show was made solely by E! And that is something that we've also heard from a studio executive who's also testified in the case.
I can hear it already. Gotti, just, we're in the news business of people saying, well, why are you talking about the Kardashians at all, right? Why does this even matter? These are, the criticism that they've gotten for years, which is they're just famous for being famous. This is a high-profile trial, but there's also some real issues here related to, celebrity and family connections and toxic relationships potentially, and a ton of money even for the Kardashians. $100 million is a lot of money, So pull back. Give us some of the broader context here.
Hallie, I mean, I can see that from where you're sitting in Washington and a lot of people, but here in L.A., I mean, this is such a big story. And technically, it's $108 million, which to people like us is even more money. And so what I think is really at stake here is reputation. So far, the Kardashians have been presenting a very unified front in all of this, rallying around Rob, who's often out of the spotlight. But, everything that you're hearing is playing out in court very much like a reality TV show, because at this point, it is.
Gotti Schwartz, thank you for that. It's good to see you, friend. Appreciate you being on. And your dog, too. That does it for us for this hour. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow, as always. Same time, same place. Appreciate you joining us. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.